Welcome to the Startup Club podcast, where we share the journeys of invention, failure, resilience, and triumph of some of South Africa's foremost tech startup founders and investors. I'm Matthew Marsden, founder of Startup Club ZA, and on the show today, we've got Idan Jaan, CEO and co-founder of Fundrr, the fintech using AI to provide quick and easy business funding to SMEs around South Africa that went on to become one of the fastest growing businesses in its category and eventually acquired by the country's largest SMEs lender, Retail Capital, in 2020. Now, before we get into today's conversation, Startup Club ZA is built on impactful collaborations, and today's episode is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Aeon's Creative Technology. Now, Aeon's is a new generation South African venture builder, identifying and investing in innovative startups with the potential for sustainable growth, impact, and job creation. The company has also spun out a services arm called Alchemia, providing functional support to startups across the board. We had the opportunity to sit down with founder and CEO Mitch and Adams to discuss more about Aeon's work and how they support startups. And you can hear more of that conversation at the halfway mark of today's episode, or visit aions.coza to learn more. For now though, let's get back to the episode.
Even our first pitch, we never even had a financial model to display. Then the guys were like, okay, where's the model? We're like, oh, what is that? And we went back, we did a model. The next pitch was like, okay, this is our model. And they was like, what's your customer acquisition strategy? And we're like, okay, we don't know what that is. And we go and Google and customer acquisition strategy, then lifetime value, and you break even on a customer, what's your default rate, provisions, what's your cost of capital that you modeled in, all these things that after every question that investors asked us, it actually helped us.
In South Africa's vibrant economy, it's common knowledge that small and medium enterprises, SMEs, are the backbone of growth, driving innovation and employment across the nation. Yet it's equally well known that these businesses face a Goliath challenge in accessing affordable financing. Historically, the traditional banking system has fallen short in meeting these diverse needs. It's actually estimated that 44% of SMEs in this country are bootstrapped. And those that aren't, 35% are financed by personal loans, with the majority not meeting requirements for formal lending. Now, the journey of funding is also marked by stringent loan requirements, high interest rates, and a lack of tailored financial products, resulting in an estimated $6 billion credit gap for our country's small businesses. However, amidst these challenges, a wave of fintech innovation continues to transform the funding landscape. And in 2017, recognizing the struggle that many small businesses faced in accessing finance, best friends Idan Jaan and Noche had the idea to build a platform to serve this important segment. After bootstrapping the business for 18 months, having investment rejections from over 50 angels, facing an existential crisis during the COVID-19 lockdowns, and having to show immense resilience throughout, Fundrr eventually concluded a transaction that changed the future of the founders' lives forever.
I mean, I always kind of did aspire to do my own thing, own my own business, but I don't think that was my direction. So at school, I felt maybe I was quite immature in my thing. I think everyone is, all school kids, but I didn't really plan a career and a future when I was at school. All I said was, I'm going to go study something broad, and I'm going to probably start out as in the family business. I did actually think I would land up in the family business.
Sure.
But yeah, you don't know, right? You don't know. But yeah, I did kind of have that vision. Probably now reflecting back on it, I did say, I'll try it out with my brother or brother-in-law.
You finished at King David Linksfield, 2008, and end up studying in Cape Town.
I think it made me a lot, very independent.
Sure.
Just because I was obviously living at home, come from a very close family. So I feel like it was kind of a breath of fresh air to just go out into the wild, and now essentially starting to have some money management making sure that you kind of like budget and stick to some sort of budget in the month. And I just felt like I grew in that regard. Not sure so much of like a worldview, because again, like for me, varsity was, I like the social aspect of it. I hated studying, and I think I always will. But I loved varsity because I met new people, met actually like great people, went out a lot. Kind of had this approach of like, I'm only a student once in my life. Like, let me just enjoy it. So I always had this like kind of like a fun attitude towards whatever like educational environment I was in. It was probably not good, but that was just kind of like the way I am.
Sure.
Yeah, look, I didn't know, like, again, I mean, I didn't study anything specialized. I just studied like a BCom. And by the time like varsity ended, it was probably the scariest time in my life. Because when I finished matric, I knew I was going to go studying, and I bought myself a few more years of not knowing what to do, and it's okay. But now it's like, okay, like you need to know kind of what you're doing. So I was privileged enough that my brother kind of offered me an opportunity to like come and test it out. Now you're asking about the food and beverage space, like that's where my brother played it. So he owns a company called Soft Coffee. One of their, back then it was heavily focused on food and beverage. They owned, he still owns restaurants such as like the Capello Group, Hard Rock Cafe. So he said, why don't you come and like just test it out? I love cooking. I love the kitchen. I mean, I still cook every day, every night of my life. It's like my passion. So I said, hey, like I love food. I love cooking. I'll probably love restaurants. I ended up spending like, it was around like 3.5 years there. I hated it, but I did learn a lot.
And what were the roles? I mean, what sort of exposure were you getting in?
I was basically like ops. So I started off with like ops, going into, I mean, back then there were around like 18 restaurants. So going in, kind of like speaking to the managers, understanding their pain points, what needs to be like better from like a head office perspective. Then I moved over, because I didn't love the ops part. Then I moved over basically to like the menu engineering part of it, like coming up and building up menus, because I loved the kitchen. I thought I would like that. I also didn't like that. And yeah, that's when I actually that's when I started like thinking in my mind. I was like, is it the industry, or is it the fact that like I don't have like pride and ownership in what I do? And that's kind of like, catapulting into the next phase. Is I approached my brother and I said like I want to start something. So he said like, yeah, let's do it in the food and beverage industry. It's what I'm good at. It's what I understand. I'm like, fine, let's test it out. Initially, I pitched to him like to do like this drive-through of like this healthy kind of like a kawaii, but in a drive-through, because I was just like, we always spend time in our cars, and there's no convenient place to like grab something healthy.
Which I think is still the case.
I
would go there.
I also think
today,
so. Yeah. I think it's like super like young millennial thinking, Don't know how scalable it is, but it's like that thinking of like, oh, I want something to do with like recycled, like healthy, like anyway, so I approached him with that, and I think in his mind, like he loved the concept, but the alarm bells went off that it's not scalable, right? So he said, look, like let's start thinking of something that we can scale. I ended up seeing this concept overseas. It's called Vapiano, which is actually like a German listed company. They've got like over 200 and something locations worldwide. Where Vapiano, it's basically like it's like a restaurant. You go in, you get a card, and then there's all different stations producing like really high quality foods. So like there's a salad bar. They do your salad like really quick. There's a high quality like artisanal pizza bar and pasta, make you fresh pasta on the spot. And I was like, this is it. I really think like this concept will do well. A lot of South Africans like crave these like high-end European concepts. Anyway, I reached out to them. Back then I was like this young 20-something-year-old guy. They obviously, I said, can I bring in your franchise into the country? They said straight out no. So I was like, fine, so we'll copy it. what did I know about like Italian food? Like nothing. So my brother and I used to go and eat at Noche. I don't know if you remember. It's like a restaurant, a few restaurants. Yeah, it's like an institution in Joburg. And we approached the owner and we said, look, we love your food. Give us the menu. Come in with us. You be in charge of like the food. We'll be in charge of like setting up the sites, like the ops of it, the branding, everything. So the Nona's part was from Noche Mia's, and then we just came up with like food bar because it was essentially like a food bar. And we said we want to go out with a bang. So we said the first location is going to be like Sandton City because, I mean, you know, growing up in Joburg, that's the holy grail, Sandton City. So we opened our first location in Sandton City and landed up growing it. I mean, I think at the peak we had like six locations. At like Sandton City, Menlyn Mall, Umhlanga, had one in Cape Town, in Sea Point Main Road, and we opened one in Dubai, opened one in Botswana. Still going today, but yeah, that was basically like us just going like deep into the food and beverage space.
Again, you're running this at the time restaurant chain.
Yeah.
And one would probably say quite successfully, multiple locations, not even just domestic, global as well. Talk to me about why you move out of that environment. You're a young director of a business. It's probably a great trajectory. You could have just done that and probably 10x the company by doing it full time, and you would have been set. So talk to me about the gap you saw, and B, what compels you to leave what you know and dive into this thing.
Look, it wasn't something I was super passionate about. I loved the concept because it was my baby, but I didn't like the fact that, you know, 1,000 things can go wrong from buying the raw product until serving it to the customer. And that used to drive me mad. So, you know, I used to get complaints like the music's too loud, the music's too soft, the food's too cold, the food's too hot, it's too spicy, it's not spicy enough, there's too much salt, I need more salt. The waiter was rude, there isn't enough smell in the restaurant. Like so many things can go wrong that you actually have no control over consistency. And that's why people say like, oh, McDonald's tastes like plastic, but it has to, you know, it has to, because you have to drive consistency. Like the consistency like threw me off the industry. And like you're saying, I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that like on paper I was like super successful. You know, we had like a lot of like branches and, you know, I had queues, lunch and dinner. You'd go on like Zomato and would be one of the top rated Italian restaurants in South Africa. Everything was like working, you know, but still come month end, I would run into cash flow issues, like cash flow pressure. Like I had to pay salaries. By then I had like hundreds of staff, salaries, rentals, suppliers. Everyone comes knocking on your door month end. You've got to pay electricity, utilities, everything comes month end. Now I would look at like my shelf in each of my restaurants. I would have like 200 to 300 grand worth of stock sitting on the shelves, hasn't turned into money yet because I'm still waiting to sell it, obviously. So like everything was there, but still come month end, I would run into cash flow pressure. So first thing I would do is obviously go to the bank, because that's what, like, you know, it's been ingrained in us. The banks went to the bank. They looked at me like mad, you know. Why? Because I was a business less than 2 years old, didn't have audited financials. I was in the food and beverage industry, which the banks don't like. So all these things stacked up against me in order to get like working capital. So what you'll end up doing is you're going back to shareholders and you're like, look, we need a bit of liquidity. And once you start taking, like, it just becomes like a vicious cycle. And I couldn't understand. I said, where can I better myself, right? Because I've got queues going out the door. What is it? Just like becoming more expensive. Then
the business is working. It's working.
It's working. I couldn't understand where I could like make it like incrementally better to fix my problems. And then once I started like speaking to like a lot of like people, they said like, this is business. You're into cash flow issues. You know, it can be very like asset rich or whatever it may be, but cash flow, there's always like a mismatch between like, you know, purchasing inventory to actually turning it into revenue, essentially to pay for things. So kind of when that thing like struck me, I was like, was like, why isn't there like a better way to access like capital as a small business? Like, because I know like the bigger businesses, they can just get, the banks actually knock on their door. They don't have to go anywhere. So, I mean, there's a lot of like solutions for those types of businesses, but the small businesses, the bloodline of the economy, there wasn't actually any solution out there for them. Then there was obviously started looking around and seen some, what back then wasn't competitors, but then landed up being competitors, the likes of like merchant capital, retail capital. I mean, they were the pioneers of the space. Back then, it was also like very, it wasn't as advanced as it is where it is today. So the process wasn't as slick, and it was just taking too long, and they were asking for like these documents which we didn't have. So then I was like, there got to be a solution that's actually better than this, right? And that's kind of what moved me in the direction of actually putting it down on paper and drafting, like coming up with a business plan. Well, the business plan that we put on paper first was nothing to what we launched with, but put down some words on paper, and that's what made me approach like Jared.
I'm so curious because Jared is a qualified CA.
Yeah.
He's obviously probably could have been on partner track by then with, the big firms. You convince him to come in on this venture. The two of you are going to self-fund it for the first one and just see if you can build something to disrupt the space. Why don't you just walk us through that initial kind of like springboard season?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, my mom remarried an American guy. So she lives in the States 6 months of the year. So we went to go visit her in the States. And Jared at that time was living in the States. He was working for BDO in the States. I think it was Grant Thornton back then, GT in the States. And we met for a couple of beers and some tacos in New York the one night, and he was just basically telling me how much he's hating work and he wants to come back to South Africa. He basically is like, he's done with this like audit life. He wants to start something. I'm like, I've had this like, it was like over 100-page business plan. It was quite thorough. Put a lot of time, effort, and energy. And as soon as he's telling me this, I'm like, I didn't tell him at the time, but I'm just listening to him and I'm like,
this is the guy.
Literally, I'm like, shit, like this is, I swear.
You can.
Okay,
you
sweet. So I'm like, shit, like what he's telling me, it's like, it's just perfect timing. Anyway, we go back and like, literally the following day, I'm like, I just sent him a WhatsApp. I'm like, give me your email address. I just sent him through the business plan. I was like, tell me what you think. Back then, it was very different to what Fundrr was. We essentially wanted to create like a peer-to-peer lending platform. So I said, I was like, in my mind, I was like, wow. I said, like, there's always a need for retail investors to earn a good return on their cash. There's always a need for businesses to access cheaper form of money. So there's always such a beautiful marriage between the two. And if you look overseas, like Lending Club and Prosper and the likes of those, I mean, they listed entities. That's what they do. They're peer-to-peer. So they create a platform where they businesses and individuals request like a loan on that platform. They underwrite the loan and essentially like unitize it, and they sell off like units of that particular loan to retail investors, and you can earn like a really good return on a debt instrument, which most of the time can yield higher returns than equity, like a stock. So. And there wasn't, and South Africans, like, they like investing. I feel like we do have that good culture. So that's the approach I pitched Jared on. I was like, let's be the first like peer-to-peer lenders in the country. And obviously he loved it. I feel like everyone that you told about that concept, they love it because I think it's the purest concept. And it's essentially the whole concept of like democratizing access to capital and allowing investment opportunities for like retail South Africans. Just, it was such a good story. So obviously it caught Jared's attention like quite quickly, just as it did mine. And the business plan that I put through was quite in depth, like on how we're going to do that. I feel like the capital outlay for that type of platform wasn't going to be self-funded. We wanted to raise capital, obviously. And And so that's when he was like, that's kind of when he had like the light bulb, and he was like, look, like let's explore it further. Obviously, it wasn't a yes or no, because there was nothing there. It was just like words on paper. But he was like, look, I'm coming back. This is probably, because he was toying with a few ideas on the side as well. He was like, look, this is definitely the most like financially viable, like interesting one. Let's kind of explore it further. And that's when we started like really unpacking what was Fundrr like back then, because we didn't just want to be like another like a working capital provider, even though it wasn't saturated at all back then.
Still a novel idea. Yeah.
I think it was like only 3 guys. I think it was like Merchant Capital, Retail Capital, Lulalend. It wasn't, and maybe like Pollen Finance back then, but like it was a lot of disruption could still happen on like lending off your own balance sheet. But you know, we wanted to kind of do something really like different. So I guess like Jared, he kind of like came back. So he quit his job because he knew he was like definitely not going to want to do what he was doing. He come back home. I was still kind of like doing this as a side gig because I didn't know if this is actually like going to happen. Jared was also toying around with a few other ideas of his own. So it wasn't anything like concrete, you know. Then like, I mean, if you actually think about it on paper, we were like 2 young guys that have zero experience in lending, zero experience in finance. Like one's an auditor, one's come from like a restaurant background. So it wasn't anything that we said, okay, we're like quitting our jobs, we're going all in on this, like we know exactly what to do. We didn't know like where to start. That's when we said like, okay, is there perhaps kind of like an incubator or an accelerator that could guide us or help us? Because even within our network, we like didn't know anyone that could help us. And that's why we came on to Alpha Code. So Alpha Code, I mean, they closed down, unfortunately, but they were amazing. They were the leading fintech incubator, I think, in Africa. It was an incubation program owned by RMR, and it was run by two ladies, Lisa Chueme and Dominique Colette, which the Dom is just unbelievable. And yes, we managed to get a meeting with her after hounding her for months on months and just reaching out to her on Twitter and LinkedIn and just constantly nagging her. I think she just gave in at the end, and she said, come through for a meeting. And we went to Alpha Code for a meeting, and we basically told her this grand plan of how we're going to disrupt the funding landscape in South Africa, and we're going to create this peer-to-peer lending platform. And as soon as she heard that, she looked at us. She said, "Do you know what it takes? Like, you guys are mad. Do you know do you know how hard it is to launch like a working capital business on your balance sheet? Never mind like now opening it up and trying to attract retail investors." Is like they obviously invested in, not obviously, but they invested in one of our competitors back then, Merchant Capital. She's like, look, we're in the space, like customer acquisition is extremely hard. Not only will you have to focus on that, now you'll have to focus on also attracting like retail investors onto your platform, and that is extremely hard. And she actually put us in touch with Charles Savage from Easy Equities, and she's like, go speak to him and see how hard it is to acquire retail investors on the platform. She's like, and you guys want to like do both of this at the same time. She's like, I strongly recommend against it. She said, why don't you start with just creating like a SME lending like platform off your own balance sheet. Like, don't open it up at this whole peer-to-peer. And we said, you know what, like that's actually a good starting point. And once the vision of Fundrr was always to be peer-to-peer. Like we never stopped with that vision because, you know, that kind of lives in our heart. And I still think that if anyone's out there and wants to give it a bash, I still think it will work. But extremely hard, like it's extremely hard. So we kind of went on this path of just starting to lend on our own balance sheet. But as soon as we pivoted the business to that, we realized that, hey, we don't actually need all these bells and whistles. We just need money now, because back then we were essentially a platform. We were asset light. We would use other people's money to fund to fund the loans essentially. But now if we're lending ourselves, we need money. Like that's our stock, that's our inventory. And yeah, that's when we kind of like went out to the market with this grand vision. You know, we wanted to raise like 30 million rand pre-revenue, and yeah, people thought we were absolutely mad. We had one, so we had over, it was over like, in total it was like over like 70 rejections. So probably 50% of that was like without nothing, just some words on paper, some like fancy models and projections, which are always nice. But yeah, we went out and we said, look, we need to start. This is what we need to start. Like, will you back us? Yeah, a lot of the guys were like, looked at us like mad, like no lending experience, and essentially like trying to do like unsecured lending with two like young guys with no business experience, no lending experience. So, I mean, one of the investors, like we always laugh about this, but one of the investors says like, what, you're asking me for all this money? I wouldn't even give you money for parking, type of thing. But that was the reality. And like, we were naive to think that, you know, the ticket size, I think when we started was like 60 million rand. Just didn't know, right? You don't know. You're just young and naive and you think like you can raise money like this. And then as we went on, the ticket size dropped because we were like, shit, just like give us anything to start. And because everyone was like, do you have a credit model? We're like, yes, we built a credit model. Has it been tested? No, we need money to test it. So it's always like a chicken and egg,
Yep,
right? Classic chicken and egg story. So I think after like 60 or 70 rejections, that's when we kind of like threw the towel and we're like, look, it's not happening. We're just wasting time. And this was probably from like November 2017 all the way to like June 2018. So we kind of like wasted like 6-7 months of just trying to raise capital. And look, I think it taught us a lot because it taught us to tell our story good. And it taught us to understand what kind of questions they look for. So every pitch, like we really did grow. Like it was incredible the growth that we had, because even our first like pitch, we never even had a financial model to display. Then the guys were like, okay, like where's the model? We're like, oh, what is that? And we went back, we did a model. The next pitch was like, okay, this is our model. And there's like, what's your customer acquisition strategy? And we're like, okay, we don't know what that is. And we go and Google and like customer acquisition strategy, then like, you know, like lifetime value, and you break even on a customer, like what's your default rate, provisions, like what's your cost of capital that you modeled in, like all these things that after every question that investors asked us, it actually helped us like incredible amounts, because it made us think of things that we didn't know existed, which was super like helpful. But it didn't help us in securing capital, because I feel like we were naive to think we would get capital. And, you know, it's a very risky business that's very capital intensive, and taking like two young guys that have zero experience in the industry. You put all these things together, like that's like a massive red flag for any investor. So yeah, we landed up like just after like 6-7 months, we were like, screw it, you know, like let's just start. Like, how much money do you have? How much money do I have? How much money can we put together? And that's what we did. We went, Jared had some good life savings. I didn't have a lot at all. I had to borrow from our family. And we each put in like, back then it was like 750 grand out of our own pockets. And we said, okay, now we have 1.5 million rand. Let's start. So obviously that 1.5 million rand was only going to be used to lend out so we can better our credit model. So we didn't have money for salaries. I mean, we didn't take salaries. We didn't draw salaries for the first 18 months. We didn't have money to hire a media company. We didn't have money to develop a website, never mind a platform. So
it's just got to step in there and just tip my hat to you, because this is unlike many startups where they would take that cash and throw it into building a great product. You needed half the cash as a lending book and to fill up the balance sheet, right? And so it's often the founder's dilemma is, how do I do so much with so little, but you almost had even less in this case because half of that cash was part of the value proposition itself.
Yeah.
So tip my hat off to you. It's not an enviable position. It's an unenviable position to be in, but massive kudos to you for also backing yourselves and putting that cash in to actually go, okay, let's make this work.
Yeah. So yeah, we just landed up like doing a website on Wix and creating some sort of like credit model on Excel. And that was our business. So we didn't have like no tech, nothing fancy. We were running everything on Excel. The accounting was on Excel. The credit score was on Excel. Literally like have like an online form on Wix where customers would submit their bank statements, and we would take those bank statements and manually capture them on Excel and have some sort of like formulas and pivot tables to kind of spit out, you know, the funder score. It's like inverted commas. That was like a proprietary score, which was out of 100. And, you know, we said like, let's start like super manual, super cheap, start getting some wins on the board. And we can always automate later on, you know, which that's what we'll end up doing. But at the beginning, we went like super lean, no salaries, no expenditure for anything. We didn't even spend on Google. The way we acquired customers was going knocking door to door. So we'd get in our car, we would go to strip malls, to shopping centers, go to like all the hairdressers, go to the printing shops, go to the restaurants, swap business cards. But like, this is what we're doing. We'd honestly like, we would give you a better service. You're dealing like with us direct, and we'll come in and beat your price. Whatever, like if you have capital with a competitor, not the banks, obviously, we couldn't compete with the banks on price, but if they have a competitor, we'll just beat your price, just so we can start getting some customers on our book. And also like it's a very like you know, you only have 1.5 million rand at your disposal, which is essentially like loan into the business. You can't go and give 1 million rand like facility into one business. You have to spread it like equally, so you don't have concentration risk. So it was also hard finding businesses that needed not a lot of capital. So in case one goes bust, like you're not fully exposed.
Is it the case that this was easy though to find those first few customers, given that everyone needs capital that bad and the gap's not solved? Or was it the case where they're still saying, wait, who the heck are you guys? I've never heard of Fundrr.
People were very, very hesitant. They were very hesitant. So obviously we started with our network. We reached out to our network, friends, families, and fools who has businesses that needs like a small capital injection. Because essentially in credit, we always say there's affordability and propensity. Like, can the business afford to pay you? That's what you need to look through their bank statements and management accounts, whatever. And do they have the propensity to pay you back? And that's actually like, that's the individual, like, is he trustworthy, or will he want to pay you back?
That's hard to measure.
Hard to measure, yeah. Exactly. So by going and tapping into our inner circle and our network, we kind of cross that part out, because we say, okay, we know this person, he will pay us back. Now we just need to figure out if the business can afford to pay us back. So like, to start off, I mean, I think our first advance to a business outside of our network was probably only in December 2018, which was like shit scary. You know, it was a 200 grand deal.
So the just talking about first transactions, the first deal you did, I believe, was July 2018.
Yeah.
That was to someone in your network.
Yeah.
How much was that for?
It was for 200 grand. But it was for businesses that we knew. Sure. And for the first 6 months, we were like, we're not ready to take the hit, because we don't actually, like, our credit models are nothing yet.
We're still building the data points, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You need data for these things to actually become a little bit accurate.
And I presume they paid you back.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good data point to prove things, but it doesn't need.
It's also skewed, right?
Massively. So that's the point, right? It's not, ironically, it's not a trustworthy data point in and of itself until you go out the network. So back to the point you were making around the end of 2018 and the first time you lend to a stranger, 200 grand you mentioned.
Yeah.
How did that go?
That was scary. We actually drove out to like sit with him. We like went to the warehouse to see that, like, it was like a clothing manufacturing business. We went to go see that the stock's there, you know, there's people there, the people are actually working there, like to see if it's a real business, you know. Towards the end, it's everything's done online. But back then we didn't have the trust in our own checks, and but well, it was non-existent, right? We had to do it super high touch, as they say. So we got in our car, went there, and it was a great deal on paper. We landed up like working with that business for many years to come, because it was just a great business, great jockey. But yeah, it was very scary. It was very scary because it was the first time we were actually like fully risking our capital, right? The capital that, and in a lending business, because the money that we put into the business was essentially a loan, there was no equity in the business, meaning that every single rand that you write off was coming out of money that you owe. It was like negative equity in the business. So we're very, very cautious in who we give this money to, and finger on the pulse in like every aspect of the way. And we used to sit and watch debit orders go off, and it was like the most stressful time. Like month end for us was so stressful. We would just sit in front of our computer and just see the debit orders go off. And even when they do go off, there's like some time where the debit orders can be reversed, and it's a super high stressful situation.
We trust that you're enjoying today's episode, produced in partnership with our friends at Aeons. Now we're going to take a quick break and hear from Aeons founder Mitch and Adams before getting back to today's conversation. Here's our chat with Mitch.
Name's Mitch Adams. I'm from Aeons. Aeons is a venture builder. We are looking to build sustainable jobs by creating sustainable businesses. And in that way, we build ventures for venture capitalists, for ESD programs, whoever's looking for a company at a certain level. I ran a company called Ozo for about 7 years. Let me not say ran, I had co-founders. I was involved in the business. We started it together, built it up to a very good level where we got a Series B exit of $48 million, which was led by Tencent. With that, I was very happy to leave the country. Reason why I wanted to do that, country wasn't in a great space. This is the year 2021. There weren't vaccines in the country. There were potholes everywhere. People hiding money under mattresses, and I just wasn't happy with the future of this. Looking at my kids, do they have opportunity here or not? Who knows? So I figured I create my own future elsewhere. But if I'm gonna stay here, we can't stay under these conditions. We need to fix something. I know this is quite a debatable topic matter, but many people believe it's not just joblessness that contributes to crime and all of that, yeah. I believe if we can get people jobs, it's the start of solving this thing. And in order to get these jobs going, you need SMEs. It's not coming from your big companies at all, but these SMEs are failing within 2 years. Why are they failing within 2 years? They're not getting funding, they're not getting mentorship. And building Ozo, we had gone through quite a few accelerators and incubators, which I feel didn't do the job quite right. Which is why I call mine a venture builder, because we immerse ourselves in the company, understand what the underlying issues are, and don't just paint everybody with the same brush. So I took a lot of my own money and I just threw it into this, created an office space, invested in 4 companies directly, built a team, and then got a partnership with Telkom Future Makers, in fact. And then built another product called Aeons Exchange, or the AX, which allows every human being in South Africa at this point in time to invest in a startup. And those in particular would be the startups that we're assisting. If I look at my own life, I got into a startup early, and what it's done over 7 years has dramatically changed my life. So we've just created this access for them. So number one, building sustainable businesses in order to create these sustainable jobs, and then spreading the wealth throughout the country. I guess this is a shameless plug for anybody, any VC, any ESD program out there, if you're looking for deal flow, come to us. We have it. We've already vetted these guys and done DD on them. Then further to that, finding the entrepreneurs that are coming up with these solutions, finding the problems, and not just saying, hey, it's a problem and then complaining about it. It's, how do I fix this? Here's an opportunity. Let me grab this and monetize it. In fact, it's not, money comes afterwards for a lot of the guys, which is what I like the most about South African entrepreneurs. It's about how do I just improve the situation for myself and for the people around me. And if money comes through after that, then great. A lot of guys don't even know it's called entrepreneurship. They just start something and they're making a difference. That's what I like most. So you want a mix of things. You want those guys just starting up where you can help them and get them to a certain level, but you also want the guys that are already running. And Startup Club created that base for it. In fact, I remember the first event I came to was the Workshop 17 one across the road from the Gauteng train station, if that's a train. And I was shocked by the energy in the room when I walked in. And this is coming out of COVID time. So for about 2 years, we hadn't had a socializing event like this. And from what I remember, or I don't want to name some of the other events, but it was predominantly white guys. And when I say guys, I mean males in particular, white males and affluent white males. There was a nice mix of cultures there, and there was this energy going on, and I couldn't tell, was it just because people haven't been interacting with each other for 2 years, or is this actually what's going on? And in fact, that whole ecosystem and entrepreneur quality that I was speaking about, it hit me on that day like, wow, there's guys here, they know what they're doing. Coming out of that, I was like, I wonder what this will grow to. And if this is the first event and this is how it starts, I want to be part of it in some way. 2 years later, people are fighting for tickets to get into a 350-seat event, and then hearing everybody, the normal events that used to exist, calling in and saying, hey, can you bring your crowd here? Can you bring your crowd there? I'm happy I made that decision right in the beginning. Basically, through this venture building process, we placed the focus initially on the folks that wanted the ventures and us building for them. And in doing so, when I spoke about the immersive aspect of us, we build a team around that founder, giving them all the core competencies that they don't actually have within the team, and help them build a team and turn their product into a good business. We found throughout time, within a few months, that many other SMEs wanted the service, but they didn't necessarily want to be built as a venture for something else. They wanted to keep their company, their own company, and build that. So we do offer those services. That's called alchemia, and alchemy is basically the process of turning your raw gold into something precious. And that's essentially what we're doing with businesses. So that's what the Alchemia service is for. So any SME that really requires those services, tech, multimedia, marketing, even business strategy, they can come to us. As an individual that's interested in startups, doesn't have an entrepreneurial bone in themselves and not much funding, they can get involved in the AX by going to the Aeon's exchange, which is aeons.exchange. As an entrepreneur, and you just want the funding or want to be part of our database, then go to Aeons and apply as a company. So if you want to learn anything further, go to aeons.co.za. That's AIONS.co.za. And we look forward to hearing from you.
That was Mitch Adams, CEO of Aeons. Thanks so much for listening. And now, back to today's episode. And I wonder then if when you decide 2019 to go back into raising some capital, because you've had your first couple of transactions, maybe the data points are less skewed, more objective. Talk to us about that season as you transition out of those early days into, there's something here. We're still not a technical product. We're not a platform per se. But what were the points where you're like, okay, actually, this is a business. We've proven this can work, and now we can go back to those same investors, some of them, and have some more material conversation.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I think it all kind of springboarded from the Alpha Code discussion, because what Alpha Code provides you, I mean, they paired us up with Turquoise PR, a lady called Michelle Blumenau. She's super talented, and they basically said we'll cover your expenses for your first like PR. We weren't like advertising back then, so what landed up happening is that, while we were going this organic route and finger on the pulse. I think it was around like in beginning of like 2019. Must check, but that's when we said to AlphaCode, we were like, okay, we're ready to like do a press release. I think it was April, and we're actually very surprised to see like what happened, because we're just getting inundated with applications. And now, mind you, like back then, we didn't have cash in the bank account. We had nothing. All our money was out deployed. Every cent that we were getting back was going out to like, we were gathering like cents and pennies to make up like a 50 grand deal so we can like fund someone else. So we never had cash. And, we said like, let's just do like this, a bit of PR, like, let's see how it goes. And that's when we had this like aha moment, and we're like shit, there's actually like, there's an ocean of businesses that need this product. And it's actually not that hard to acquire customers. When you're small, it's easy. But obviously, when we grew bigger, we realized it's very hard acquiring customers, just like in any business. So that's, to answer your question, that's when we had this like realization. We're like, okay, we need capital, because we cannot go like this anymore. And by that time, we've been operating for like 8 months, and I, again, very naive, but our claim to fame was 0% default. Actually, investors don't like that. It means that you haven't learned anything. Your credit model isn't like trained enough, because you can't have a lending business with 0% default. It means you're not taking enough risk. You're not sweating the business out as much as you can.
What a funny irony, huh?
Exactly, literally. So we were going out. We were like, look, that's it. We figured it out. Like lending business, 0% default.
How many businesses do you think you'd funded by then? How many deals had you done?
Wasn't a lot. I can't remember, but like maybe like 20, 30. It wasn't a lot at all. It was nothing. But yeah, so I mean that was like, but that was that point where we were like, okay, we need cash. How do we go about getting cash? Again, started like engaging funds and stuff like that. But the way these funds work is that they gear your equity on your balance sheet. And we didn't have equity. So, I mean, even if we converted all of the debt that we had into equity, we still don't have enough money to raise anything. So, I mean, we went after like high net worth like individuals, and we managed to get like 3 guys on board, which, they were like instrumental to our business, because they were very, very hands-on. They sat on like, they said like they managed to raise a small round from them, but they were like, okay, if we give you this money, we got to sit on the credit committee, you need a board seat. They actually started structuring our business, like formalizing it, because back then we didn't have a board, we didn't have anything. It was just two guys like just hustling it out. And that's when we actually started learning about like, shareholders, and how to, update them on a monthly basis. And it's actually not your business anymore. There's other partners involved. You can't just make whatever decision you want.
That's the caveat, right, to raising capital. That
100%.
A lot of founders don't realize, and that also becomes kind of the CEO's primary job, is keeping shareholders
100%.
happy. It's no longer product and customers. And of course, that was still a big part of your portfolio, your responsibilities, but it is the transition one has to make. Was it? Did you find that came quite naturally to you? Was it always smooth sailing with those shareholders? They're on the mission. They're going to champion you to high times, low times. What was it like?
They were amazing. No, they really were. They were amazing. Obviously, we had arguments. Everyone has arguments, but I think arguments are good because it means everyone cares, right? So we all deeply cared in this business, and I think the money that the angels put into the business was also like their hard-earned cash. So it wasn't like this fund that just gives you money and you're like, okay, do what you want with it type of thing. It was like something that was like very personal to them. And this business was something that's very personal to us. So there were a lot of emotions, obviously, but I mean, they were unbelievable in what they taught us. And essentially, like, they were like, okay, like now we had like a credit policy and we had like a credit pack that we'd put together for every application. It taught us like how to formalize the credit process, which is essentially our backbone of the business. How to run like minutes in board meetings. But yeah, obviously there were arguments here and there, but that's natural, right?
Sure.
But all in all, it was like a very positive experience with the shareholders, and you know, we needed it. It wasn't a choice of like, do we go slow? And we didn't have an option to go slow because we needed money. And that's why, like, I feel like coming from the outside into an industry sometimes is good because you're naive. And if I knew how capital intensive this business would have been, Jared and I both, we would have never started this business because it's like the most capital intensive business you can ever go into. And it's like, we always compare it to like a...
Money is your product, right?
Exactly. It's your stock sitting on your shelf. So like, you're like a convenience store and you don't have like a Coca-Cola to sell, you can't make revenue. If we don't have money, we will never be able to make revenue. And we were just too young and naive to know that we were just said like, the money will come. Don't worry. We'll figure it out. And it did come at the end, but it took us like very long and a lot of sacrifices. And we were lucky, you know, that it just worked out like the way it did. And look, even the money that we raised, the first like angel round, it was just something to get the ball rolling. It wasn't anything that was going to change our business in any way, shape, or form. It was something to prove the product still. It was still like, you know, if you're now looking at like the VC term, we're still pre-seed. We didn't know like our product. We didn't know anything. We just needed a bit of fuel. Yeah, to basically just like keep the engine burning a bit.
And presumably you can start taking a small stipend out of the company.
Yeah.
Just getting your mind maybe focused on execution as opposed to survival, which I think is the beauty of getting right angel on early, to have the sobriety, enable the founder, not restrict. Presumably this money goes into proving the business points now, to building the case study. You are formalizing a lot of things. And it would be remiss of me not to then talk about the absolute shambles that was COVID pandemic 2020, which had a material negative impact on the cash flow of small businesses, your customer. Talk to us about just that season, Idan, and what that was like. Now you've got some cash, but again, it's not going to last you 10 years. You're probably on the cusp of doing something really exciting, only for the world to shut down. What was the COVID season like?
Yeah, so that was like the most intense like patch of my life. Like, no jokes. I mean, not only was COVID intense, but from a business perspective and the exposure we had out. Now we also signed like personal surety for this money that we had. So our own
well-being
was on the line here. Now, out of the businesses, and I can't remember how many businesses we had on book back then, but we had quite like a good chunk. Now, out of the business, all the businesses that we had on book back then, overnight, 90% of them like had to close their doors, meaning that 90% of them, we didn't write it off, right? We had like an extension, like, you know, credit policy, and we basically said like they will pay us back, but current cash flow, like, they obviously can't, their doors are closed, so we can't expect them to pay us back. So we basically paused. We didn't accrue interest or anything. We just paused their debit orders. So we basically, 90% of our book was on a payment holiday. So 90% of our revenue was slashed. The 10% that was still performing was like these private like ambulance companies, which their sales like shot through the roof. So they landed up settling early because they were performing so well. Then we were sitting, I think, 2 to 3 weeks into like COVID. was sitting with 100% like non-performing book, meaning that the money was out there. We don't know if it's going to come back, right? And your job essentially, as well, mine and Jared's job, was just to provide comfort to the shareholders that their money's okay. There was nothing else we can do. Can't grow the business. No one was lending out more money back then.
You had staff at this point?
No, it was just
still the two of you?
Just the two of us, and yeah, we were shitting ourselves, literally shitting ourselves. We ended up phoning all of our customer base, giving them like, you know, trying to say like, look, everything's okay. We're here for you. We're not like trying to collect, but subconsciously trying to get comfort ourselves that these guys are like not going
on commitments,
not going bust.
Yeah.
So we were phoning them to give them comfort that like, don't worry, we're not going to be like running debit orders. But at the same time, we was trying to read the tone of their voices. Like, these are panicking. Like, if they're panicking, we in shit over here. But really, like, I mean, and it shows the resiliency of like small businesses, especially like South Africans during COVID. It was unbelievable to see like people was like a world pandemic going on. People like level 5 lockdown. We didn't know how long it's going to be for. People's main business was like shut down. They don't know when it's going to open again. Even when it opens, we don't know what the economy might look like, but still like so positive, being like, you know, we'll get through it. Don't worry. We'll open our doors. We'll carry on trading. And that's funny enough, like from that, we kind of brought into like our credit model that we saw a higher percent of, success rate in funding to businesses that it's their sole like bread and butter, right? As soon as it's a side gig, when something goes wrong, you'll close it. That's what we saw with a few of our businesses, that, you know, this guy was like, let's say working for like a corporate, but he had like this sandwich baron franchise or whatever on the side, and it was just like a cash cow for him. As soon as like as soon as times were tough, he would be like, oh, I don't need this. I'll just close it down, carry on being employed. But if it's your bread and butter, you'll fight, you know, and that's what majority of our businesses were like. These guys, bread and butter. These guys like fought, and ladies, obviously, they fought, and you know what? We landed up like having to maintain a default rate through pre and post COVID, which was ridiculous, right? No one would have expected. We thought like our default rate would be like minimum at like 20 to 30%, meaning like a fifth or a third of the book will just get written off, and you know what, we'll make a plan and we'll come with it. But during this time, I said like, I'm going to go and find a job, and Jared's going to carry on like winding the book down. Every cent that we'd collect, we paid back like our investors. Then I would just go and like look for a job, because this business is like tickets, like we tickets. It's impossible to recover from this. And yeah, it was just kind of like that point in time where I'm far from a pessimist. However, like that point in time, I was convinced there was no recovery. We were not coming back from it. Like I was convinced this business is like finished. And I was like, I had like a good outlook on it. I was like, shit, you know, we had like a good run. We did something that was great. It was like force majeure act that made us like close down. So it wasn't even like something bad happened. It's like natural, you know, COVID closed a lot of businesses down, and it closed ours down, and we'll kind of reconvene afterwards. But the economy actually landed up turning quicker than I think anyone expected. I think if you remember, like, I think it was around August, like we were back up on our feet, you know, and it was just like unbelievable. Like businesses were like trading again, and people were paying us back, and like the book was getting revived, and it was just unbelievable to see like how quick things turned around. That kept us like in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about one of the common things I think our guests get questioned on is just that mental resilience through seasons like that, which every founder goes through. You call it the COVID season, but for other people, it's not COVID. You know, it's cash flow this month, or I know I'm out of runway in 3, or you know, we've got this existential crisis that we could never have planned for, that somehow we've got to make it. Do you think that's where just the merit of having a great co-founder and maybe some sobriety around you just goes, hey, you're going to get through this? What was it for you guys? What was it? What do you think it is for you as a founder?
Yeah, I think co-founders definitely. Very privileged to work with Jared. He's obviously much smarter than I, and definitely like leaning on each other in times like these. But I think the main ingredient was that we were so lean. We were so lean, meaning that we could cut off all expenses overnight, and and just wait out the storm, right? Just wait it out. So we didn't have this massive like headcount that now we're like responsible for people's salaries. And it wasn't by choice. It wasn't like we wanted that. We just couldn't get access to funding. So we were super small and nimble. But I think that's what saved us, because we didn't have to, like, I mean, what, marketing? No one's lending out anymore. Okay, switch that off. Office space, we didn't have office space. We were in an incubator. Okay, we're not paying for that. That's fine. Like, salaries, let's just take like a 90% cut on our salary this month. And like, it was just so nimble that it allowed us to like weather the storm, basically. So to answer your question, I think it's more around being lean than anything. If you lean, you can put time's on your side, right? Because you're not in this like ticking time bomb, and you can have this nimbleness to like turn on and off certain elements in the business that can make you a lot more resilient, I think.
I mean, I love that. I think it is a real practical insight that a lot of founders overlook in their pursuit of growth and scale, and they assume that means headcount and expenditure has to go up. There are some other ways to do that if you're looking to build a resilient business, to the point that you've just. 2020 is an instrumental year for you in other respects. For the business, you land a pretty significant customer as the economy starts to turn in telecom. Launch a funding product on the back of Fundrr's, dare I say, rails or platform. It had become more platform-esque by the time, I understand, in that you were still doing a lot of manual things, a lot of spreadsheets in the background, but nonetheless at a far more intuitive interface and maybe onboarding and disbursement process around. The telecom becomes pretty instrumental, but then you also meet a pretty interesting guy in Carl Vesvig from Retail Capital, who you've mentioned already on the podcast, was technically one of the pioneers in the space. Carl's background is lending, Retail Cap, big name in the small business lending space as well, and for all intents and purposes, a competitor. Tell me how that introduction comes about and what eventually that means for yourself and for the Fundrr business.
Yeah. So look, by that time, I mean, I wouldn't say we had like a full platform, but we were definitely with that injection that we got in May 2019. We invested into like automating like quite a lot of things. So I wouldn't say like we were fully automated, but we were definitely better than what we were before. By that time, I mean, in around 2019, Telkom went out to the market and said, look, we want to create telecom financial services. One of the pillars is going to be called Telkom Lend, and we're looking for a partner to power up a Telkom Lend. Obviously, everyone went for that because it's a massive distribution channel. I mean, at the time they had 500,000 businesses through their Yellow Pages Yep Telkom Business portfolio. And over and above that, they want to put massive marketing budget behind it. They're basically looking for balance sheet and platform to white label for Telkom Lend. Now, we went in, obviously, didn't ever think we would like get it. And we kind of just forgot about it, and then we get a call around like April 2020. Now, this is like peak COVID. Get a call from Telkom. Maybe that kind of spring led them making a decision. They were like, look, this is happening. You're going to receive the SLA in your inbox later this week. Service level agreement came, and we won the contract. Now, at that time, we couldn't even afford to pay like salary. We had no money in the bank account, like no money. I was like basically looking for a job, like kind of like, you know, half-heartedly, but I was kind of like, that was that time we reached where we said like, look, I'm going to leave and then Jared's going to wind down the business. All of a sudden we get this like, this call from Gano Sibusiso and Gwenya, which was heading up Telecom Financial Services. It's like, okay, how quickly can we get this thing up and running? I go to him, I'm like, Spoo, like, listen, like it's COVID, no one's lending out, like we're just focusing on our book. Let us kind of like give us a little bit of time. He's like, okay, fine, but like I want to get going like right away. Sent through the service level agreement. Now I'm sitting with a piece of paper that's worth like a lot, with nothing kind of
No cash to lend.
No cash. Obviously, first thing is reaching out to like our current shareholders. They're super excited, but you know, they say like, look, I mean, we have capital exposed now. It's not for us. You know, we need to find like a big player to come behind us. So reached out to all of the like VC, PE, private debt, institutional debt. Like I lined up. My only job was raising capital now. So lined up multiple meetings. And then everyone was saying like, shit, you guys are crazy. You know, it's like you want to raise money to deploy unsecured loans essentially to SMEs, which are like the most volatile sector in the economy. It's like level 5, level 1, level 3, level 5. Like you don't know what's going to happen. Like President was speaking like every week or whatever, and you don't know what he was going to say. He was going to say, oh, we're back to level 5 again, lockdown, everyone's home, or we level 3. It was very, very volatile economy. So yeah, we kind of quickly realized that the whole institution and kind of like, we weren't going to be raising cash now. People said like, look, we love your brand, we love what you're doing, we love you guys, but it's just not the right time. Come back later. We didn't have that that privilege of waiting it out. So so I reached out on LinkedIn to the Godfather, to Carl. It was Carl and Dov from Merchant Capital. That's it. And I reached out to both of them and I said, look, like we're competitors on paper, but we're not actually competitors. You guys are like light years ahead of us. Feel like we like good jockeys. We got a good brand, and we got like a good distribution channel opportunity happening. Come into our business. Like we'll give you a free carry in the business. Give us a funding line, and you know, like we'll sign personal surety, whatever you want. You can have first right on our book. We'll like whatever you're lending at, give it to us. Mark it up. You'll earn money on the interest as well as you get a free carry in this business. And that was my pitch to them. And, you know, Dov, like, I mean, I've got a very good relationship with Dov. He just said like, look, now's not the right time. But Carl, he was very interested. Because I feel like I said, this was around like August-ish. The economy was slowly coming back up. And I feel like, you know, for business lender, that once you have it's always like a chicken and egg story. Once you need capital, you need to deploy that capital. Once you finish deploying that capital, you need to raise capital. So, I mean, Carl, I think anyone would give money to Carl because he's just like, he's just the maverick. So raising capital for him wasn't a hard part. Everyone's looking for distribution. And here comes these two young guys with this like piece of paper. Not only do they have like I think like a good brand in the market, probably saw some value in us being jockeys, what we did, because he couldn't believe how small we actually were once we exposed like our numbers to him, because we kept on being come up internally as
competitors,
as a competitor. And it was him and the ex CFO Guy Hoskin who immigrated, but they couldn't actually believe how small we were, which was a good tap on our back for us. It was a compliment. Yeah, exactly. So he landed up like phoning us and he was like, look, let's do a DD, obviously, like we're interested. Once the DD's passed, he said, look, like I want to buy the whole thing. We were like, no, like we're just starting now. We have this thing, like we're not ready to sell, like we're just starting. He basically made us like an extremely good offer. Like he basically said, he was like, look, I need to own this thing on paper, so I need to buy 100% of it. Whatever you raised your previous round in May 2019, I'm gonna 4x it. The valuation was peanuts, but still, I was like, I'll give you 4x, even though the business didn't grow because it was during COVID. He said, I'm going to buy 60% of that business. I'll pay you out 60% for that valuation. And then the remaining 40%, you're going to have an earnout, which will be based off 12 months of revenue from March 2022 until the end of Feb 2023. And you have unlimited balance sheet. So whatever money we raise, you have access to it. Back then they had like a note program, like basically like a listed note program that they had like unlimited access to capital. And we kind of saw that as like the most like amazing opportunity. And Carl being who he is, you know, is kind of, we saw it as an opportunity to kind of like work with him, which has a ton of value to it.
For you personally, sure.
So we'll end up doing the deal. You know, it took us long, and we kind of consulted a lot of our mentors, and everyone, once they looked at the deal, they said that the only reason you'll reject this deal is if you think with your heart. And in business, you need to think with your head. And this deal makes sense because you're in a position where like accessing capital is hard. You've got a good distribution opportunity, which if you don't perform, is going to get taken away from you. You get access into the most advanced funding ecosystem in South Africa, which is retail capital. So yeah, we ended up doing the deal with them, which was amazing. The first tranche definitely wasn't like the wow thing. We were always working towards the earnout. And
which, by the way, for the listeners on the call, founders, this is often what acquisition looks like. It's not, hey, this is the sexiest thing I've ever seen. Here's R1 billion. Cheers. I think just even you going through the structure of that earnout and that deal is super valuable. So thank you for sharing that. But yes, you do have some work to do, I think, also, which aligns parties' incentives. And so you've got a little bit of cash in the bank now, 2020. Spend the next 3 years working in the machine, but growing this business, right?
100%. Carl did it like very smart. So he first of all like put the ball in our court. It was like, fine, if you want to like go and sit on the beach all day, you can. Your earnout won't be good. Or if you want to push, like here's all the tools, here's the money, push, let's grow together. So we were very aligned to like grow this thing like aggressively. And basically the way the valuation worked, it was 12 months of revenue minus 12 months of cost of capital minus 12 months of cost of risk, meaning like provisions or bad debt. So it was really incentivizing us on growing, but writing good deals and not worrying about like marketing expenses or like acquisitions. It was like, don't worry about the bottom line. We'll take care of that. You just grow the top line, which was amazing for us because we were like, shit, we have like everything now. We just need to like go and grow the book. Easier said than done.
Of course.
But what we managed to achieve with retail capital, we would have never been able to achieve it with anyone else. So I'm super like grateful for them. And, you know, even like, you know, put me on like the exco there. I was the youngest person by miles sitting now on like retail capital exco, which like I knew nothing. And I was silent for the first probably first year, actually. Like I had zero confidence. I was like, who am I to like say something to these guys? Sure. I'm the youngest person by miles. Like these guys have been around for like 10 years in the space. Like they know everything inside out. It was like very intimidating, but as well as like we learn structures. We learn how to run a business rather than a startup. And that's what like I'll forever like be grateful to Carl, because he taught us what it is to like run a business. And if you look at like Carl's business, like I always told him, I was like, if I can replicate like 1/10 of that, just the culture, the way it works, the way he set up his shareholders and cap table and his management style and everything is just like perfect. So gave us a blueprint to go on and structure things further on, because we had zero experience, coming from like a 2-man kind of like shop where we were doing it wasn't culture, there wasn't anything, it was just 2 young guys like
holding it together.
Exactly. So yeah, that we grew. I mean, we grew the book like aggressively. We were like 17x the book in like 2 years, which was like ridiculous.
It's mind blowing. Also standing on the shoulders of folks who'd figured out, I think, a lot of the mechanics that otherwise taken much longer to do. Right?
Exactly.
We're hopeful to have Carl on the podcast in coming months. Obviously, he's gone on to
amazing.
He's gone on to sell their business to TymeBank for a significant amount, and has been one of our first in-person guests at Startup Club. But a quick shout out to him as well, just on today's episode. Idan, I mean, of course, we could talk a heck of a lot now. You have subsequently earned out of the business, moved down to the Cape, married, first kid. Life looks a little different than Idan starting out this business with his best friend. Talk to me about what it's been like for you just on the, and maybe also tell us about what you're working on now. You've earned out of Retail Cap at the end of last year, I understand, 23. It's been a little bit of time since then. What's it like the day after you've earned out? You've left and now you're like, okay.
Yeah, so I'll end up actually spending another year there. Just been employed. It was post-acquisition. So kind of things were like shifting, and, there was a lot of opportunity for growth. I still think TymeBank will be one of the most promising South African businesses. So in terms of like, opportunity, I felt like there was a ton of opportunity there. But I felt like the sale of Fundrr, it wasn't anything to retire off, but it was something to allow me freedom to give this entrepreneurial concept another bash. And that's what I did. I felt like if I didn't take this opportunity now, I'll blink my eyes, I'll be 40, a few kids, and you can't just be as nimble as you are when you're in your early 30s. So I felt like I needed to do something now, and take a bit of risk. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't work, I've got a bit of a cushion to not be, moving back home type of thing. So I'm super grateful for that. And so I ended up leaving in February 2024. Quit at Retail Capital. I served my notice, and went straight back in to another startup for my sins. It's been super intense, but it's been amazing. So got involved in a startup called Flex Club, essentially providing democratizing access to mobility. So what it means, it's basically we're a platform that provides flexible leasing products for vehicles, partnered up with some of the leading car rental companies, like of Avis, Budget, Europcar, basically accessing their idle fleet. We approached them and we said, you guys are focused on like short-term car rentals. Why don't you give us some of these cars? Let's create like a long-term product for customers. If you look overseas, for South African customers, you look overseas, people don't own cars. They subscribe to cars, they lease cars. And, looking at the mobility gap in South Africa, I started looking at it and I was like, there's 2 million vehicle finance applications every month in South Africa. Only 48,000 vehicles actually get sold. There's a massive gap between people trying to access cars and people actually accessing cars. The whole car area really attracted me because I had a restraint of trade on selling money, which is like an easy thing to sell. So I said, what is the next easiest thing that people want? And it's cars. I feel like South Africa is very, very car obsessed country. And I know nothing about cars. I didn't know anything about lending before, but I'm learning. But I feel like, there was this quote that I read. They said, first-time founders are product obsessive, second-time founders are distribution obsessive. And that's so true, because every business that I looked post Fundrr, I was like, what am I going to get stuck in? I was like, what can I sell? And when we get like this whole concept of Flex Club really kind of like hit it home for me. So, really providing like South African consumers with flexible leasing on vehicles. These are like brand new vehicles, and creating like a all-inclusive package. So you come onto our platform, you tell us what car you want, how long you want it for. Do you want a baby seat? Do you want an additional driver? You basically build a package around your needs, and we give you 1 monthly fee, which includes the car, maintenance, and insurance. The only other fees that you'll pay over and above that is petrol, traffic fines, and toll fees. So you're basically now
Just the running costs. Yeah.
And now you're starting to create some sort of certainty around your vehicle expenditure on a monthly basis. And yeah, we had the way these rental companies work is they work off customers having a credit card. Cool, you can access a car. Now, 80% of South Africans do not have credit cards. So we kind of came up with this concept of prepaid mobility, I like to call it, just like the mobile network operators created the prepaid back in the day. So before, the only way you could get a number is via contract, which you needed to go through credit underwriting. Then they created the prepaid cellular prepaid vouchers. Now all of a sudden, anyone with like 10, 20 rand in their pocket was able to call, and that opened up like the whole of South Africa into communicating with one another. So we took the same concept that was on mobile, we're bringing it into vehicles, meaning that we created like a prepaid plan around your cars. Come onto our platform, we'll tell you, for example, it's 6 grand a month. Pay 6 grand upfront. You get the car for 30 days with 3,000 kilometers. And that's your plan. Like after 30 days, you want to top up your account again, pay again, and you can have it for indefinitely. But that stripped away the whole credit underwriting and credit vetting around putting people in rental vehicles. So now we can basically service any South African that previously couldn't get access to vehicle finance or a rent-a-car. And the one thing that really got under my skin was to see all these like predatory car rental companies, meaning like a bad credit score, you got judgments come to us, they place you in like this old beaten up vehicle, and they just land up charging like exorbitant rates for it. And it doesn't have to be like that. Just because you have a thin credit file, or just because you don't get access to credit from a financial institution doesn't actually mean that you're not backable. Exactly. So instead of having like a product that gets built in arrears where you need to go through credit underwriting and vetting, now we said, why don't we prepay for the product? And that's where we can access anyone, right? So we're really kind of, I hate the term disruption, but I think we're really disrupting the vehicle space and the mobility space. Now everyone that has a bit of cash in their pocket is able to access like a roadworthy brand new vehicle that has insurance, maintenance, everything tied in. Give you an example. We had like 2 weeks back, we had a customer phone us. He hit a pothole. Within 20 minutes, we replaced the vehicle for him. So, I mean, it's taken away all these like hassles of vehicle ownership and providing a really good solution. Well, I think, obviously I'm biased, but yeah, we launched in Feb, and it's going really well.
I love that. I love that. I mean, clearly you are galvanized by the new mission that you are getting out of bed for every morning. It is uncanny, the similarities in trying to solve the small business lending gap, and now picking as hard, as audacious a problem to solve, and doing it ironically in the same way. I see so many parallels between this obsession over the process and making things easier for the customer. Even though you've just said, I don't know much about mobility, this is the beauty about the founder journey, is no lesson is lost. Coming in as COO of this business, you can just see where you are lending immediately, all these operational efficiencies and knowledge and know-how. And I think I have no problem with a shameless plug for Flex Club on the podcast. And I think folks need to be attentive to that and very much a watch this space endeavor. So very, very excited for you. this next leg of the journey. It is
Thank
an
you.
incredible shame in that we only have an hour with guests per episode, because I think we could probably sit here and discuss a whole bunch of things, from the South African tech ecosystem to opportunity to just some of your personal best practices and habits. But I think in the interest of letting you go, one of the things we love to ask founders before they do depart is, what does success look like to you? In and amongst all of this building and solving problems and tech ventures that can work and don't work and get funding and all these things, what does success actually look like for Idan? You're an old man one day, you look back on all of this. What made it worth it?
Look, I've never been like with Fundrr and FlexLab. I'm not one to not have a work-life balance. So I'm always like, come like 5 p.m. I spend time with my little boy, and dinner time I'll spend time with my wife, and weekends I switch off. So whichever kind of like business I'm in, I make sure to maintain like a good, healthy balance. Success, obviously, as cliche as it sounds, like it has to be like in monetary terms. Like I need to be like building something that can obviously like, reward me well. But at the same time, I think the most important thing is the freedom, right? And I feel like that's what Fundrr has brought me. It's the freedom to try something else, to take risk again. It's the freedom to say, like I love my job and what I'm doing, but actually I might want to take risk again, which was not necessary risk, just the freedom to test things out. So I think for me, success, even further down the line, is the freedom to back the next young jockey, to make enough cash to back the new generation, to get involved in many startups. I think I like it. Like the one thing with my previous partner with Jared, he always had the clear distinction where I like the 0 to 1 and he liked the 1 to 2. He loved it when the business was like more like stable, scaling, systems in place. And I love the fact that like the business might pivot tomorrow. We don't know like what we have, we can chop, change, test. I love that. So if I think the freedom to continuously do that, like, sure, I don't know, like as you get older, it's harder, like doing these like startups. Sure. I was speaking to like my wife, and I was saying, I don't know if I worked as hard at Fundrr as I'm doing now. Maybe I just blocked it out. I don't know, but like it's hectic. It's like, so I don't know how much in many more like startups I have in me. Probably saying that I do, but just saying like the freedom to kind of take a gamble on someone, or get stuck in like passion projects, and that's success for me.
I think wisdom for listeners on the show today, and undoubtedly supporters and fans of yours who are going to listen in and take those, relate to a lot of the first-hand experience. More than anything, I think we're grateful for you sharing some of the candor and transparency, and on this new venture or whatever lies next. Very, very excited for you. Thank you so much, of course, for being on the Startup Club podcast today. Thank you for sharing this journey. We are thrilled to see what you do next. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Idan Jaan, former founder of Fundrr. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. That was Idan Jaan, co-founder and CEO of Fundrr. I'm Matthew Marsden, and again, if you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe to our channel, follow us on our socials, and share this with your network. We look forward to seeing you next time.